What invention is way older than people think? Canned food was invented in the 1770s, decades before the can opener in the 1850s. The modern headphone jack was invented in 1878 and has only really changed in size. Rollerblades are from the 1700s. The idea of George Washington on roller skates makes me chuckle. The condom, they have been traced back to ancient Egypt. Yet some people still have no clue about their purpose some 6,000 years later. Edit, of course my highest rated comment is about condoms, thanks Reddit. Actually the first modern ones were Scottish and made out of a sheep's intestine. The British later improved upon the condom by taking the intestine out of the sheep. Edit, wow, now more than half of my upvotes are from a repost. r/jokes would be proud. Glasses were invented in 1290. Amazing. 3D printers have been around since the 80s. But it wasn't until the late 2000s that patents began expiring and small companies could introduce more affordable and less industrial printers to the general public. Vibrators were created in the 1880s. It was believed that female hysteria could be cured by giving women orgasms, and the vibrator was created so that doctors wouldn't have to treat them anymore. It's not that the docs didn't want to do it, their poor hands were cramping from all the treatments they gave women. The spirit was willing but the flesh was spongy and bruised. The Romans gave each other the middle finger. The first lighter was invented in 1823, 3 years before matches in 1826. A lot of people assume matches were made first, and usually assume they are much older. Contact lenses. Leonardo da Vinci had the idea of contact lenses in 1508 and the first successful contact lenses were made in 1888. Well, in fairness, Leonardo da Vinci had the ideas for everything long before the rest of us. It must have been really frustrating to have all these ideas centuries before the materials and industry existed to make them practical. Frown. The vending machine. The Greeks invented a water dispenser that you would put a coin in and it would fall onto a lever, opening the seal and giving you some water. The pipe organ. Its origins are in the 3rd century BC. Fun fact, the main pipe organ in the Sydney Opera House took 5 years to build and 10 years to tune. First video game was invented in the 50s. World War II and video games are separated by only 13 years. The ancient Romans, well, the wealthy ones, had central heating in their homes. You can actually still see the pipes in some of the buildings at Herculaneum. The Nintendo company was founded in 1889. Nokia was founded 24 years before that, in 1865. Musical instruments. The oldest known musical instrument is a 43,000-year-old flute, carved from a bare femur. Wiki. Concrete. Romans had concrete, and they were very good at it. It's fairly recent we have figured out how they made ocean-resistant piers. The submarine. The first was made in 1620. It had oars that stuck through leather seals and snorkel hoses for air. Edit, technically a submersible. Thanks, u/Scratchin Warlock. Haven't seen it mentioned yet, so 3D movies. The first one popped up around 1915 and the first major commercial film in the format was The Power of Love in 1922. If you included stereoscopic tech it goes back to the late 1800s. Billiard balls. First mentioned in 1588. The fax machine was invented in the mid-1800s. Hashtag facts said it. Apparently using a pound sign on Reddit makes the text big and bold. Till. Chocolate. I remember when they first invented chocolate. I was watching a show yesterday about ancient inventions, and it turns out automatic doors were invented in ancient Greece, though they were mostly used in theatrical and religious ceremonies. The internet. Everyone thinks it's a 90s thing. Functional parts of it go back before the 1960s. Ideas and speculation go back to the 1940s. Color movies. Color movies actually predates audio movies. However, color film was more expensive to buy and develop than black and white, but people weren't willing to pay extra for color, so it wasn't economically sound to shoot in color. Hell, not even The Wizard of Oz turned a profit. There are actually a few color silent films out there, but since people actually were willing to pay extra for audio movies, that seems like it was invented earlier. It wasn't, it just got popular earlier. Edit. Some examples. I'm not talking about black and white film being hand painted in a variety of colors. I'm talking about actual colors being captured by the camera. Here's a short clip by pioneer Edward Raymond Turner from 1902. Can you imagine that this clip is from the same year as A Trip to the Moon? Granted, it doesn't amazing, but it looks real. Here's a clip from a 1926 silent film with intertitles and all starring Douglas Fairbanks, but shot in glorious Technicolor. Air rifles were invented in 1779. The Girandoni air rifle was a 46 calories, had a capacity of 22 round balls that were gravity fed into the chamber. It used no gunpowder, so no smoke to give away position, and had a high rate of fire, much faster than traditional muzzle loader. The buttstock would hold up to 800 pounds per square inch of compressed air, which took about 1,500 strokes from a hand pump to fill. It was powerful enough to put a hole through a 1-inch pine board from 100 yards away, so it could cause significant damage by a skilled marksman. It was used in the Napoleonic Wars, and was famously carried by Lewis and Clark during their expedition across North America. Hedy Lamarr patented what became the backbone of our wireless digital comms, such as Wi-Fi and cellular service, in 1941. Edit. Folks, I used the word patented and not invented for a reason. It's Headley. Backgammon is over 5,000 years old. Chew on that. Coincidentally, that is also the last time anybody enjoyed backgammon. Can't see it anywhere in the comments, so here I go. The digital camera was a viable technology in the 70s, but was held back by Kodak. One of their engineers created the first digital camera, but the story goes that film cameras were such big business the Kodak company stopped it. I wonder what the MP count would be on a 1970s digital camera. Animation. The cave paintings in Lascaux were made in such a way that flickering oil light would create the illusion of motion on the cave-painted animals. So, that's 21,000 years old. Look it up, or start here. Vaccines. First ever vaccine was a smallpox vaccine in 1797. The still most effective spring-loaded mousetraps were invented in France 427 years ago. Firearms. Some of the first things resembling guns were built over 1,000 years ago. Rockets are just about as old. Unlike guns, rockets haven't really changed much. Simply put propellant in a tube and point the whole bastard away from yourself. Also, your username sent me down a rabbit hole watching Russian YouTube videos trying to figure out who TF Nissan Navara is. 1994 Nissan Navara. The check is older than cash. And credit predates the check. It predates writing, really. A lot of people think the barter system was the entire way that people traded goods and services for thousands of years. It was not. People traded in various ways, sometimes using things like beer, salt, cowrie shells, and gold as de facto currency. Currency was not a necessity for most of these communities. However, much of the time, payment was not made up front. Instead, an agreement was drawn up and overseen by an arbiter, who would hold people accountable. Usually the arbiter was some third party who had no stake in the deal. It rarely went past an IOU, but these IOUs were very important. Going against an IOU often meant penalties dished out either by the legal systems of the time, or by the poor fellow you tried to frick over. It was a primitive form of credit, but it was still credit. Not to mention, your creditworthiness was determined largely by your reputation in a given town. Eerily similar to how your credit score is determined by your activities, what people would lend you was based on what people knew about you. If you were trusted in the community, people would be more willing to give you bigger loans. Not only that, there was often a fee prescribed for later payment, often related to the size of what's being lent, aka interest. Even the Code of Hammurabi outlines rules for interest. Read a bit more here.